may have heard the phrase that inflammation is the root of all disease, or that sitting is the new smoking. And those phrases are really true, but it's part of a bigger picture. It's part of talking about chronic illness and autoimmune conditions. And we know that's something that's really plaguing our entire generation, our entire population, and it's something that we really aren't dealing with super well. And so if you have talked at all about autoimmune conditions or chronic diseases, you know that it is something that's usually involving the gut and the immune system, but also the brain and the nervous system. And that's where chiropractic really comes into play. And so medical doctors, of course, like to prescribe something for that to help, typically NSAIDs, corticosteroids, something to lower the inflammation. But there's another approach that we can take. And that approach usually involves more of a functional medicine approach or an integrative medicine approach. And when we talk about that, it's usually looking at like dietary changes, lifestyle changes, vitamin supplements, protocols. And part of that most people tend to miss is a hidden piece, and that is looking at your nervous system and subluxation specifically. So when you're trying to look at what is the root cause, what's going on, let's dive deep and see what it is. Usually subluxation is that bottom layer, the missing piece, the trigger, and that is where chiropractic comes into play. So if we are talking about the chiropractic piece of this, we are then diving deep into looking at the vagus nerve. And so our vagus nerve is something that's kind of a buzzword in chiropractic. You may have heard a lot about it, may not know exactly what it is, but it's important to know that approximately 27% of children in the US have a chronic condition, and 1 in 15 have multiple chronic conditions. It's also very important to know that your cortisol or your stress, your HRV, really plays a role in further autoimmune conditions and chronic conditions. So when we look at someone's scans in our office, if their HRV is showing poor, I have a talk with them about how that in a couple years, 5-10 years, could be why so many Americans have an autoimmune condition, mostly women, and what that looks like now to try to figure that out, try to figure out that health piece for them. Because that's something that if we don't get ahead of, down the road, we're going to have multiple chronic conditions. Autoimmune conditions usually come in a pair or threes. They don't just come up one at a time. And so once you get plagued with something that's serious, there's usually more that's thrown onto your plate, and your body cannot deal with all of that stress, and you have another autoimmune condition, another chronic disease, and then you're stuck in this cycle, of course, of pharmaceuticals and doctor appointments and figuring out what's going on in your body. So from a more functional medicine chiropractic approach, we're talking about the inflammation, and 95% of the information you're going to find when you're looking this up online, when you're kind of researching for your kiddo, researching for yourself, your husband, whoever it is that we're looking at the gut, the microbiome, and how that, of course, affects immune system and the inflammation in the body and how to get rid of that. And so when we go down that road of looking at the gut and dysbiosis, and all of the things that happen on a very microscopic level in the body, that leads us to a place of cutting out things from our diet, usually gluten, dairy, grains, sugar, seed oils. The list can go on. And that's an amazing place to start. It's really important for our health that we're kind of looking to see what we're putting into our body does affect our body. It does matter. And so that often leads to dietary changes, or it leads to those protocols that I was mentioning to try to combat that inflammation. But it's an incomplete protocol. You still have to attack the inflammation at a root cause, and that's that vagus nerve. It's that subluxation. So the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, which means it comes from the cranium, which is your skull, your brain, and it's running from the brainstem all the way down to all of your organs, like your heart, your lungs, your gut. And it's basically coordinating and signaling that rest and relax, digest, heal, and grow that our parasympathetic nervous system does. The converse of that is our sympathetic nervous system, and that's your fight or flight. So your body is either in the state where it's ready to fight, flight, or freeze, or it is happy and resting and digesting and healing and growing. So if your body is ready to fight a bear, it's not going to sleep. If your body is ready to run as fast as you can from someone chasing you, your body is not going to digest your food properly. It's going to excrete it fast so that you can run with all your might. So your body cannot do both things at once. There needs to be a harmony between them, a balance between them, And your body should be able to go back and forth, but never adapt to just being stressed or just being relaxed. It needs to have a compromise, and it needs to recover from either direction that it's in. And so when our vagus nerve is interfered with, we get a subluxation, and that's basically where that pathway is not going to work as well as it should. There is basically static to the signal. There's traffic on the highway, and your body and brain cannot communicate effectively, so you are never going to be able to rest and digest effectively. And so when we throw things like diet in there, or lifestyle changes, or interventions, or supplements, we're just getting a piece of that. But if we still are telling that nerve incorrect information, we're going to have inflammation. And so at our office, we just do something called neurological scans. And so we're looking at things like the neurothermal testing that's measuring differential and heat in the body. We're looking at the temperature of the spine, the inflammation right there. It gives us a really good picture of where we have inflammation. We're also looking at the HRV. So that heart rate variability test is really telling our body where we are with stress. Can our body recover? Can the body adapt? Can the body rest at all? And so we're seeing so many things now with the Apple Watches and the Oura Ring and different measurements of how our body is handling stress, and can it recover, and should we rest instead of workout? But there's so many deeper pieces to that. Your body being able to communicate to itself is the number one important thing. So if you are looking at knowing that there's inflammation, thinking that's the cause of some of your disease, if you're trying to avoid getting an autoimmune condition because they run in your family, or you've seen someone deteriorate from them, attacking inflammation is the most important thing to do for our health in general. Inflammation is the cause of all disease. And a great way to start that process, a great way to think about looking at that, is looking at the chiropractic piece of it and trying to figure out, is there a subluxation? Is my body not able to communicate? Is my body having a lot of interference in itself and struggling with, it's telling me I have these symptoms, and that's my red light. It's saying SOS. I have all these symptoms because my body is yelling at me to pay attention to it. So if that's you, you can learn more. You can call our office with a discovery call. You can learn more about inflammation on our website. You can kind of deep dive into this and see how we can help you with all of our insight technology.